The sound comes first, a deep, uneven growl rolling in low from the west. An engine no one on this British airfield has ever heard land here before. Not the smooth, thoroughbred snarl of a Merlin, not a Hurricane, not a Spitfire. Something else. Something heavier. It is the summer of 1942. Britain has been at war for nearly 3 years. America has been at war for 6 months. And what is about to touch down on that grass runway in Wales in the next 90 seconds is going to hand the Royal Air Force one of the greatest intelligence windfalls of the air war so far delivered, freely, by the enemy himself. The men on the airfield look up almost lazily, half annoyed at the interruption of an ordinary shift. Then they see it, a single-engine fighter banking in over the Welsh coast, wings tilting into the landing circuit as calm as a training flight coming home, and painted on its fuselage, unmistakable in the low golden light, are the black crosses of the Luftwaffe. Nobody moves. For several long seconds, the entire station simply stares, because what they are looking at is a Focke-Wulf 190, the aircraft that has, for the last 9 months, been shredding British fighter pilots over occupied France. The aircraft the Royal Air Force has been trying, and failing, to capture. The aircraft that, by direct order from Berlin, is never supposed to appear over British soil. And it is not fleeing. It is not being chased. There are no Spitfires escorting it in. There are no cannons hammering it out of the sky. It is simply lowering its landing gear over an English training station on a summer evening, as if it belongs there. To understand why this moment should be impossible, we have to go back 9 months, back to the autumn of 1941, back to the beginning of a problem the British had absolutely no idea how to solve. The Spitfire Mark V, the aircraft that carried Britain through the Battle of Britain, the aircraft that has become, in the public imagination, almost a symbol of survival itself, is suddenly, quietly, being outclassed. Squadrons that fly sweeps over France return smaller than they left. Pilots come back shaking, describing something they have never seen before. Something faster. Something that rolls into a turn before they can even react. Something that dives away from them with no hope of pursuit. The intelligence officers begin building a profile from wreckage photographs and eyewitness reports. A new German fighter, radial engine, broad wings, heavy cannons, designated the Focke-Wulf 190, and every report says the same thing. When it engages a Spitfire Mark V on equal terms, the Spitfire loses. For British planners, the answer is obvious and impossible at the same time. They need one of these aircraft on the ground, intact, undamaged, sitting in front of engineers who can take it apart bolt by bolt. Only then can they understand what they are fighting. Only then can they design something to beat it. But the Germans understand this too, and they have taken every precaution. Standing orders go out from the very top of the Luftwaffe. The Luftwaffe issued strict standing orders prohibiting FW-190Hs from crossing the English coast whenever possible. No Focke-Wulf 190 is to be flown across the English coast under any circumstances. Not for reconnaissance, not for interception, not for any reason at all. If the aircraft is engaged, it must break off before crossing the water. If it is damaged, it must be brought home or ditched in the channel where the wreck will sink beyond recovery. The secret is that important, and in London, that same secret drives men to draw up plans that begin to edge into the absurd. Several unconventional proposals were discussed within British intelligence circles, including ideas involving captured German aircraft, although none progressed beyond preliminary consideration. Still in its Luftwaffe colors, flown by an RAF pilot who speaks fluent German. The plan is almost stupidly simple on paper. The Messerschmitt lands at a Luftwaffe base in occupied France. The pilot climbs out, plays the part of a visiting officer, walks over to the nearest Focke-Wulf 190, climbs in, and simply takes off, steals it, flies it home. It is the kind of plan that gets written in a war where nothing else is working. And the fact that it is being seriously considered, not laughed at, not shelved, but genuinely turned over as a live option, tells you exactly how desperate Fighter Command has become. None of the men working on that plan know that the entire operation is about to be made unnecessary. By one pilot, by one wrong compass reading, on the evening of June the 23rd, 1942, roughly 300 miles south of London, on a Luftwaffe airfield outside the small Breton town of Morlaix. That pilot is starting his day. His name is Oberleutnant Armin Faber. He is 26 years old, dark-haired, sharp-featured, and by the standards of the war he has been fighting, remarkably safe. His posting is Gruppenadjutant of the 3rd Group of Jagdgeschwader II, a fighter wing whose emblem still carries the name of the greatest German ace of the previous war, Manfred von Richthofen, the Red Baron. The 3rd Group flies the Focke-Wulf 190, and Faber, on paper, flies with them. As Gruppenadjutant, much of his time was devoted to administrative duties, although he continued to fly operational sorties, and the role of Gruppenadjutant is a desk role. Faber handles administration, personnel files, the dull, grinding logistics of running a fighter unit at war. He signs forms. He tracks postings. He processes the letters that go to mothers and widows when men do not come back. He is a qualified pilot. He has combat time. He has flown the Focke-Wulf. But the missions that matter, the interceptions, the sweeps, the fights over the channel, are flown by the men whose full-time job is to fly them. And on this particular June afternoon, that gnaws at him. Somewhere in the paperwork of Jagdgeschwader II that afternoon, there is a single request. A junior staff officer asking, formally and in writing, for special permission to fly a combat sortie with 7 Staffel that day, not because he has to, not because anyone has ordered him, but because the weather is beautiful, and the Focke-Wulfs are being scrambled, and he does not want to spend another good flying day behind a desk. The request is granted. 1 signature, 1 line of ink. It is, in every sense, the smallest piece of paperwork on the base that day. And it is the paperwork that will ultimately lead to the end of his combat career. Across the channel, in the soft green fields of Devon, 6 Douglas Boston medium bombers of 107 Squadron of the Royal Air Force have already lifted off with a specific target in mind. Their destination is Morlaix, the exact airfield Faber is about to take off from. The operation has a name in the RAF planning documents, Ramrod 23, a precision daylight strike, escorted by fighters, meant partly to hit the airfield and partly to draw the Luftwaffe up into a fight over its own ground. Above the Bostons flies the Exeter wing, 3 squadrons of Spitfires. The 310, the 312, and the 313, all of them manned in large part by Czechoslovakian pilots who have traveled a long, painful road to reach these cockpits. When Germany dismembered Czechoslovakia in 1939, some of these men escaped through Poland, others through the Balkans. Some fought in France in 1940 and had to flee again when France fell. Some walked half of occupied Europe on false papers. Every one of them arrived in Britain and asked to fly against the Luftwaffe. Their wing leader is Wing Commander Alois Vashatko, 33 years old, Distinguished Flying Cross, a veteran of the Battle of France and the Battle of Britain. In a matter of hours, he will not survive the flight. Radar picks up the incoming raid. The signal goes out to the Luftwaffe fighter stations along the French coast. Morley scrambles, and Armin Faber, still buttoning his flight jacket, runs out to the flight line and climbs into the cockpit of a Focke-Wulf 190 that is not really his to fly. He climbs into the sky over Brittany, the radial engine steady under his hands, the coast falling away behind him. He is one of a handful of aircraft in the interception. The formation climbs. Vectors come through the headset. Somewhere out over open water, a squadron of Spitfires and 6 Bostons are already turning for home. His squadron will meet them in the middle of the channel, and that is where the next few minutes of his life become impossible to control, because he is about to make one small mistake, and then another, and another, each of them tiny, each of them the kind of thing that happens to combat pilots every day of this war. Except this time, they are going to line up in one specific order. By the end of the evening, he will hand the enemy the single piece of intelligence they have been unable to steal, unable to buy, and unable to plan for. He will land it gently on their runway. He will lower the gear himself, and he will not know what he has done until the canopy opens. They meet each other somewhere over the middle of the English Channel, 2 formations of men coming toward each other at nearly 600 miles an hour of closing speed, none of them aware yet of exactly who is going to die in the next 15 minutes. Below them, the water is gray-green and choppy. Above them, high summer haze. The Boston bombers of 107 Squadron are already turning for home, low and hard on the deck, engines shaking with everything they have. The raid on Morlaix has gone in. The bombs are gone. Now there is only the run for the English coast, and the Spitfires holding station above them like a rolling metal ceiling. Wing Commander Alois Vashatko rides at the head of that ceiling. He has done this exact ride more times than he can count. Poland, France, the Battle of Britain, now Devon. He is 33 years old, and by any reasonable measure, he has already lived several lifetimes of war. He does not know that this is his last one. The Focke-Wulfs come in from the south, high, fast. The Luftwaffe pilots have altitude, they have the sun, and they have the aircraft that has been winning these fights for 9 months straight. The Czechoslovakian pilots see them a heartbeat too late. Someone calls the warning. The Spitfires break upward, engines howling, wings juddering as they claw for the height they should already have had. And then the sky comes apart. There is nothing clean about a dogfight. Nothing like the film reels. Nothing like the diagrams in the training manuals. It is a knife fight in 3 dimensions at 300 miles an hour, and the men inside it are pulling so hard on their controls that their vision grays at the edges from the blood draining out of their heads. Tracers cross the frame. Aircraft flick past close enough to feel the wash. Every second, the geometry changes. Every second, someone chooses wrong. Vashatko chooses to press an attack. A Focke-Wulf swings across his nose. Close, banking hard. He follows it. Rudder, stick, throttle. Bringing the Spitfire's guns onto the target. Closing the range. This is the shot he has trained for since the summer of 1940. This is what he does. He never fires it. The two aircraft come together in mid-air. The precise sequence of the collision remains uncertain in surviving reports. What is known is that Vashatko's Spitfire and the Focke-Wulf collide over the channel, both aircraft breaking apart in the same instant. The German pilot manages to bail out. His parachute opens. He will spend the rest of the war as a prisoner. Vashatko does not bail out. Somewhere in the debris cloud that used to be two fighters, the man who fought his way across 3 occupied countries to be in that cockpit simply disappears. No body is ever recovered. The Exeter wing loses its leader in the first 90 seconds of the engagement. And above the channel, the fight goes on without him. Uglier now, because the men flying it know. And in the middle of all of this, one aircraft on the German side has already lost the formation. The Focke-Wulf 190 of Oberleutnant Armin Faber is alone. He does not remember how it happened. That is normal. Men who survive dogfights almost never remember how they got separated. One moment you are on your wingman's tail. The next moment you are in clear air with nothing around you but sky and threat. Faber banks hard, head on a swivel, eyes hunting the horizon for the shape of a friend. He does not find one. He finds a Spitfire instead. The Spitfire is behind him. The pilot in that Spitfire is Sergeant František Traitnar of 310 Squadron, 30 years old, another Czechoslovakian exile who has crossed continents to arrive at this precise second in the sky. And he has just seen a Focke-Wulf 190 hanging alone in front of him with no wingman and no altitude advantage. For Traitnar, this is the shot of a lifetime. He goes to work. The two aircraft begin the long, terrible ballet of a pursuit. Traitnar has the position. Faber has the aircraft. Neither one is enough on its own. Faber breaks hard right and dives, using the Focke-Wulf's advantage in the vertical. Traitnar follows. Faber rolls out, pulls up, cuts across the sky. Traitnar stays with him. Every one of Faber's tricks. The Spitfire matches. Every second the range closes another few feet. And Faber is running out of options. He is running out of altitude. He is running out of fuel. And he has just noticed that one of his cannons has stopped working. He does not have time to check why. He does not have time to do anything except fly and think and keep the aircraft between him and the sea and keep breathing. He turns north. He runs. Below him, the coast of Devon slides past. English fields, English roads, English farmhouses. A Luftwaffe pilot flying deep into enemy territory, low, alone, with an enemy fighter locked to his tail and the light beginning to soften into evening. The scramble briefing from a few hours ago feels like it happened to a different person. The desk in Morlaix, the paperwork, the signature on the request form, all of it, somewhere behind him, on a different planet. Traitnar closes the range again. Faber can see the Spitfire in his mirror now. Close. Too close. In a matter of seconds, the Czechoslovakian is going to have a firing solution. And one clean burst of 20mm cannon at this range will end everything. Faber has one option left, one maneuver, one chance. He pulls back on the stick, hard. The Focke-Wulf climbs almost vertical, engine screaming, world tilting sideways in the canopy. Faber is doing something with maybe 50 years of aerial combat behind it. A maneuver commonly associated with Max Immelmann, although the modern aerobatic Immelmann differs from the original First World War maneuver against the British in the skies over Flanders in 1915. Half a loop upward, Roll out at the top. Come out of it going in the exact opposite direction, above and ahead of the man who was chasing you, straight into the setting sun. For a full second. From Traitnar's cockpit, the Focke-Wulf simply disappears, vanished into the glare, and Traitnar keeps flying north, blind, waiting for the shape to come back into view. It comes back head-on. Faber has one working cannon. He has one pass. He has one chance to shoot before the two aircraft close and merge, and it is all over. He puts the gun sight on the Spitfire, and he holds the trigger down. The rounds go home. Traitnar's Spitfire staggers in the air. Something inside the fuselage lets go. The canopy fills with smoke. Traitnar can feel the aircraft dying under him. The controls going soft. The nose starting to drop. He does what pilots have done since the beginning of pilots doing it. He gets out. He blows the canopy. He unbuckles. He rolls the Spitfire onto its back and drops away from it into the empty air of a Devon summer evening. He is bleeding. A shell fragment has caught him in the arm. When his parachute opens and he swings under the canopy, he can see his own Spitfire spinning down toward the fields below him, a small trail of black smoke marking its last flight. It hits the ground somewhere near a village called Black Dog. On landing, his leg breaks. The pain is enormous, but he is alive. He is on English soil. Men are already running toward him across the field. His war goes on. Faber's does not. Faber does not know it yet, but the moment he lined up that head-on shot into the sun, he set in motion a chain of events that no pilot on either side could have predicted. Because that maneuver, brilliant as it was, cost him something he cannot afford to lose. It cost him his sense of where he was. He is exhausted. His hands are shaking on the stick. He has just, in the span of about 4 minutes, been hunted, cornered, and forced to fight for his life against a better positioned enemy. His breathing is ragged. His heart is hammering against the harness straps, and his fuel gauge is falling toward the red. He needs to go home. He rolls the Focke-Wulf onto a new heading and he checks his compass. And here is where the story turns on something so small, so ordinary, so human, that it is almost impossible to believe it decided anything at all. Faber needs to fly south. His base in Brittany is south. France is south. The Channel is south. Every safe thing in his world is behind him and to the south. He looks at the compass card. He sets a new course. He flies north. The mistake he has just made has a name. A reciprocal heading error is a well-documented form of navigational disorientation under combat stress. It happens when a tired, stressed, adrenaline-flooded human brain looks at a magnetic compass and, for a fraction of a second, reads it exactly 180 degrees wrong. South becomes north. North becomes south. The needle points where it always did. The pilot simply sees the wrong end of it. It is a documented, well-known phenomenon in combat aviation. It has killed men on both sides of this war. It has sent Allied bombers into neutral Sweden and Luftwaffe fighters into the sea. And on the evening of June the 23rd, 1942, it is now sending Armin Faber, in the most secret single-engine fighter in the German Air Force, on a heading directly away from home. He doesn't know it. He flies on. The clouds pass beneath his wings. The engine drones on in its steady rhythm. He is convinced he is going home. He is picturing the coastline coming up out of the haze. He is picturing the field at Morlaix. He is picturing his own bed. He is thinking about the paperwork he still has to sign in the morning. Ordinary thoughts of a man who believes he has survived a bad afternoon and is now going to get to have dinner. And then he sees land. Gray water opens up into headlands and cliffs and green fields beyond, glowing in that particular gold that England and Wales share in June. Faber lets out a breath he did not know he was holding. There it is. The coast. The coast of France. Home. Except it is not France. He is looking at the south coast of Wales. The stretch of water he has just crossed is not the English Channel. It is the Bristol Channel. He has flown almost exactly the reciprocal of his intended course. And the coastline he now believes is Brittany is in fact the coastline of a country he is at war with. He does not know. He cannot know. To an exhausted pilot with a falling fuel gauge, coastline is coastline, green is green, and below him, sliding into view, is exactly what he has been praying to see for the last 20 minutes. An airfield, long grass runways, hangars, aircraft parked in dispersal, a control tower, everything he needs, everything he expected. He tips the Focke-Wulf into a gentle bank and begins to set up his approach. The airfield below him is RAF Pembrey. It sits in the county of Carmarthenshire, on the south coast of Wales, and its full-time job in the summer of 1942 is teaching young RAF airmen how to shoot. It is home to the Air Gunnery School. It trains gunners, not fighter pilots. The men on this station spend their days working the turrets of bombers on gunnery ranges out over the water. There are no operational fighter squadrons here. There are no anti-aircraft batteries dug in around the perimeter. There is no scramble alert. RAF Pembrey had no immediate fighter defenses on alert, leaving personnel with little means to stop an unexpected landing of the flight line. If Armin Faber had picked, out of every airfield in southern Britain, the single one he would most want to land at as a lost Luftwaffe pilot, this is the airfield he would have picked. He picks it by accident. He glides in low over the Welsh countryside. He drops his landing gear. He notes with a professional pilot's satisfaction that the field is clear, and the runway is long and everything looks exactly as it should. He is going to be down in 90 seconds. He is going to be safe. And then, because he is a fighter pilot, and because he has just been in a life-and-death dogfight and shot down an enemy, he does something more. He wants to celebrate. He wants his ground crew to know. He wants the men in the hangars to look up from what they are doing and see him coming in. He wants them to understand that he has been in a fight and he has won. So he waggles his wings, the classic gesture of a pilot returning with a kill. Left, right, left, right. Sunlight flashing across the black crosses on the fuselage as the Focke-Wulf rocks side to side in the air over Wales. And then, because he is feeling it now, because the adrenaline is still burning through his blood, he does one more thing. He rolls the aircraft. A small, tight victory roll, right there over the runway. A pilot's signature. The universal language of "I got one." The kind of thing men on his home field would have grinned at from below. The men on this field are not on his home field. The men on this field are British. They stand on the tarmac and they watch a Focke-Wulf 190 do a victory roll over an RAF station, painted in Luftwaffe gray, black crosses in plain sight. And every man watching it knows exactly what he is looking at. And not one of them can quite make himself believe it. Faber straightens the aircraft out. He completes his approach. He lines up with the grass. He greases the landing so smoothly that any instructor watching would have nodded in approval. The wheels touch. The Focke-Wulf slows. He taxis calmly toward the dispersal area, exactly the way he has taxied 100 times before on 100 quiet evenings in France. He is home. He is not home. Somewhere behind him, in the control tower, an RAF duty officer identified in contemporary accounts as Sergeant. Jeffries is already moving. He has watched the entire approach. He has watched the wing waggle. He has watched the victory roll. He has watched the black crosses cross his own runway. And he has done the arithmetic in his head in the time it takes any competent man to do it. The nearest weapon he can find is a signal flare pistol. He takes it. He starts running across the open tarmac of RAF Pembrey. In the fading light of a Welsh summer evening, one middle-aged British non-commissioned officer runs toward a fully armed enemy fighter with a flare pistol in his hand and absolutely nothing else. No sidearm, no rifle, no backup coming behind him, just the flare gun. Because at a gunnery training school on a quiet Tuesday, that is the only weapon within reach. The Focke-Wulf is still rolling toward the dispersal area. Its propeller is still turning. Its engine is still ticking over. Its cannons are still loaded. The pilot inside it is a trained combat officer of the German Air Force who has just, in the last hour, shot down an enemy fighter in single combat. Jeffries does not slow down. He reaches the aircraft as it comes to a stop. He steps up onto the wing route, the way ground crews do it, the way he has watched RAF pilots do it every day of his working life. He steadies himself against the fuselage. He points the flare pistol at the canopy, and he waits. Inside the cockpit, Armin Faber is completing the small, familiar rituals of a pilot shutting down after a flight. Fuel cutoff, magneto switches, throttle back to idle, straps, helmet strap. He is thinking about the walk to the debrief. He is thinking about a cigarette. He is thinking about the fact that his hands are still shaking a little, and he does not want anyone on his ground crew to notice. He slides the canopy back. He looks up, and the man looking down at him is not wearing Luftwaffe gray. The man looking down at him is wearing the blue-gray of the Royal Air Force. There is a flare pistol 6 inches from his face, and the face behind the flare pistol is the face of an Englishman on his own airfield, in his own country, doing his job. Nobody speaks. For a long moment, both men simply look at each other across the tiny space between the muzzle of a flare gun and the collar of a German uniform. And what changes on Faber's face in that moment is something almost impossible to describe. It is the face of a man watching every fact of his own life rearrange itself at once. The coastline, the airfield, the wing waggle, the victory roll, the mechanics he thought were his mechanics, the runway he thought was his runway, all of it, wrong. He does not resist. There is nothing to resist. He is a single German officer on an enemy airfield, in an aircraft too heavy to move without help, with a flare pistol at his temple. And everything he has just done in the last 30 minutes he has done to himself. He climbs out. He does not remember the walk to the office. He does not remember much of the next hour. What the records tell us is this. Several post-war accounts state that Faber attempted suicide shortly after his capture, although the surviving documentation is limited. He did not succeed. He was stopped and searched and secured. And by the time the sun had fully set on the Welsh coast that evening, the most closely guarded aircraft in the German Air Force was sitting on a British runway with British hands on the wings, and a British duty pilot writing the strangest report of his career. The news travels fast, and it travels up. Before the night is out, the Air Ministry in London knows. Fighter Command knows. The Royal Aircraft Establishment at Farnborough, the beating heart of British aviation research, knows. Men who have been trying to steal a Focke-Wulf for 9 months are being woken up in their beds to be told that one has been delivered to them for free. They also know something else. They know that if the Luftwaffe finds out what has happened, and finds out fast, British authorities considered the possibility of a German attempt to destroy the captured aircraft before it could be examined. Before the aircraft can be moved, destroy the evidence, deny Britain the prize. It is exactly what the British would have tried to do if the roles were reversed. The aircraft has to move. Tonight, if possible. Tomorrow at the latest. There is a brief, serious discussion about simply flying it to Farnborough. Somebody suggests putting the RAE's chief test pilot into the cockpit and having him take off from Pembrey and land it at Farnborough's 200 miles east. The idea is not stupid, but the risk is too high. If something goes wrong, if a fuel line has a problem, if the engine gives out over the English countryside, the aircraft is lost, and this aircraft cannot be lost. So the decision is made to take it apart. Ground crews swarm over the Focke-Wulf. Wings come off. The propeller is removed. The tail is disassembled. The whole aircraft is broken down into components, loaded onto lorries, and driven the length of southern Britain under armed escort, in convoy, at night. Nobody along the road is told what is in the crates. And while the aircraft goes east, its pilot goes somewhere else. Faber is put into a car for the drive to RAF Fairwood Common, near Swansea, for formal interrogation. His escort is Group Captain David Atcherley, 37 years old, twin brother of another well-known RAF officer, Richard Atcherley. Distinguished career, firm hands, a man who has spent the war being trusted with the kinds of jobs where you do not make mistakes. Atcherley sits beside Faber in the back of the staff car with his service revolver drawn. The whole way, he does not put it down. He does not put it away. He does not let it out of his hand, because the man sitting next to him has just, single-handed, given the enemy an intelligence windfall that significantly improved British understanding of the FW-190, and there is not going to be an escape attempt. Not tonight. Not while David Atcherley is in the seat next to him. The road from Pembrey to Fairwood Common in 1942 is not a road that has been engineered to modern standards. It is a country road, in Wales, in wartime, with fuel rationing and skeleton maintenance crews and stretches of tarmac that have not been properly repaired in years. There are potholes on that road. Some of them are deep. The car hits one of them. The jolt goes through the whole vehicle. Bodies come off the seats. Everything in the cabin lifts and drops and lands hard. And in David Atcherley's hand, the trigger of a loaded service revolver, held at close range on the man sitting a foot away from him, gets pulled by pure physical shock. Several accounts describe Atcherley's revolver accidentally discharging after the vehicle struck a pothole, narrowly missing Faber. Take a moment on that. This is a man who, in the space of a single afternoon, has flown into combat, been hunted by an enemy fighter, shot that fighter down in a head-on pass through the sun, become fatally disoriented over enemy territory, landed at an enemy airfield believing he was home, been captured by a single sergeant with a flare pistol, and tried to end his own life in the office minutes later. And now, on his way to interrogation, he has been shot at from a foot away by his own escort, entirely by accident, and lived. He looks at Atcherley. Atcherley looks at him. Neither man says a word. The car keeps driving. The Focke-Wulf, When it arrives at Farnborough, is reassembled with the kind of care usually reserved for museum pieces. The engineers at the Royal Aircraft Establishment go over it inch by inch. Every rivet is examined. Every panel is opened. Every wire is traced. The armor plate is measured. The cannons are stripped. The engine is turned over on a test stand and its performance is charted at every altitude the British can simulate. The aircraft is repainted in Royal Air Force colors. Given a new serial number, MP499. A capital P is added inside a circle on the fuselage to mark it as a prototype under evaluation. And on the 3rd of July, 1942, less than 2 weeks after it landed at Pembrey, Wing Commander H.J. Wilson, the man they call Willie, the RAE's chief test pilot, climbs into the cockpit, starts the engine, and takes Armin Faber's Focke-Wulf 190 up into the English sky under British colors for the first time. The intelligence begins to flow almost immediately. The engineers confirm what RAF pilots have been reporting for months. The Focke-Wulf's ailerons are operated by rigid metal pushrods, not by the stretching steel cables of the Spitfire. That single design choice is responsible for the roll rate that has been killing British pilots at low and medium altitude. The engine, a BMW 801, a 14-cylinder twin-row radial, is more powerful than British intelligence had estimated. The armament is heavier than expected. The pilot's visibility is superb. The armor is well laid out. The aircraft is, in every way that matters, below 20,000 feet. The machine the RAF has been fearing it to be. But then, up in the thinner air above 20,000 feet, something changes. The Focke-Wulf's performance falls off, not slightly, sharply. At very high altitude, the aircraft becomes sluggish. Its control forces become heavy. The tight, snapping maneuvers that make it so lethal down low become slow and predictable up high. There it is. The weakness. The weakness that RAF Fighter Command has been searching for since the previous autumn. The weakness that could not be found from wreckage photographs, could not be teased out of interrogation reports, could not be guessed at from combat records. It is right there, in the flight data of a single captured aircraft. And the evaluation quickly influenced RAF tactical guidance and accelerated the introduction of the Spitfire Mark IX for every Spitfire squadron in Fighter Command. Do not try to outdive it. You will not win. Do not try to outroll it. You will not win. Take the fight upward. Force it to altitude. Fight it in tight. Sustain turns. That is where the Spitfire still has the advantage. That is where the Focke-Wulf becomes ordinary. The captured aircraft flies on. It is transferred to the Air Fighting Development Unit at RAF Duxford, where it is put into mock combat against the new Spitfire Mark IX, the aircraft that is being rushed into service specifically to fight the Focke-Wulf on more even terms. It is flown against hurricanes, against typhoons, against every fighter the RAF has. Every flight adds another page to the tactical manuals. Eventually, it goes to a specialist unit called 1426 Flight, whose nickname among the pilots is the RAF. Its job is to fly captured enemy aircraft to Allied units so that pilots can see, with their own eyes, what they will be fighting. Between the 3rd of July 1942 and the 29th of January 1943, Armin Faber's Focke-Wulf 190 flies 29 documented sorties in British service. It is finally struck off charge on the 18th of September 1943 and quietly scrapped. By then, the war in the air over Europe has moved on. It is worth pausing here to say something clearly. Over the years since the war, A small number of writers have suggested that Armin Faber's landing at Pembrey might not have been an accident at all, that an exhausted officer might have deliberately steered himself onto a British airfield, that the reciprocal compass error is a convenient story that hides a quiet act of defection. There is no evidence for this, not in Faber's own statements, not in the flight records, not in the interrogation transcripts, not in the physical evidence of the aircraft itself, which was fully armed and combat-ready when it landed. Every piece of documentation that survives points in the same direction. This was not a defection. This was a mistake. A tired, disoriented, adrenaline-poisoned mistake made by a man who genuinely believed he was going home. That is what makes it what it is. Not sabotage, not espionage, not the payoff of some clever operation. Just a man, alone in a cockpit at the end of a bad afternoon, who read one instrument wrong for one important second. And that is the strange, quiet weight of the whole story. The war in the air over Europe in 1942 was being fought with radar, with code breaking, with wind tunnels, with the most advanced engineering that either side could put into an aircraft. Thousands of the smartest people in Britain and Germany were, at that moment, pouring their entire lives into the problem of who would control the sky. And for one evening in June, all of that turned on something as small as a tired pilot losing track of north and south, and one sergeant on a training airfield who was brave enough to run out onto a runway with nothing in his hand but a signal flare. Armin Faber survived the war. He spent the rest of it as a prisoner. He was eventually repatriated. He went home to a Germany that was no longer the Germany he had left. He lived quietly. He grew old. He did not become famous. Most of his neighbors, in the decades after the war, had no idea what he had done on the evening of June the 23rd, 1942. And then, in 1991, almost 50 years to the year after that evening, he did something nobody had asked him to do. He went back to England. There is a small aviation museum on the south coast of England, near a village called Shoreham, that keeps the fragments of that day as part of its collection. The armored glass windscreen of Faber's Focke-Wulf is there. Part of the instrument panel is there. Some of the wreckage of František Traitnar's Spitfire is there. All of it laid out, quietly, in the way small museums lay things out. Armin Faber came to see it. An old man now, gray, slower, walking the length of a small English museum in a coastal town, past cases of British and German artifacts side by side, looking at pieces of the aircraft that had ended his war, looking at pieces of the aircraft of the man he had shot down. Before he left, he brought out two objects he had carried with him, his officer's dagger and his pilot's badge. He gave them to the museum to keep, to display beside the other pieces, beside the wreckage of the Spitfire he had shot down, beside the windscreen he had looked through on the evening he lost his war. He asked for nothing in return. He simply gave them. And then he went home. They are still there. You can see them today, in a small case, in a small museum, on the south coast of England. Two personal artifacts of a young man who once climbed into the most secret fighter in the German Air Force on a summer evening in Brittany, and, through no plan of his own, no courage of his own, no genius of his own, made a significant contribution to Allied understanding of German fighter capabilities during 1942, in the space of about 20 minutes. And in the same room, not far away, sits the armored windscreen he was looking through when he did it. Two pieces of glass and metal, A war being fought with everything human beings could build, turned, for one evening in June, on the smallest and oldest thing of all, a tired man and a wrong reading of a compass.